Good.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us at the Marion Natural History Museum. Our guest today is Eric Dorfman, Dr. Eric Dorfman. Eric is director and CEO of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and an adjunct professor at North Carolina State University in the Department of Marine, Earth, and Atmospheric Sciences. He earned his doctorate from the University of Sydney on waterbird habitat use and a master's degree through California State University, San Jose, studying the behavioral ecology of harbor porpoises in Monterey Bay, which must have been wonderful. Prior to his current role, Eric was director of the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh. While there, he was an adjunct professor at University of Pittsburgh, where he taught a semester-long course on natural history museums. Eric lived for many years in New Zealand, where he was the director of the, you're gonna have to help me with this, Wanganui?
Henry.
Okay.
Yes.
Regional Museum, and lectured in the Museums and Heritage Studies Department at Victoria University of Wellington. Eric is the author of several books as well as scholarly papers on museum education, public programming, Egyptology, and the ecology of wetland birds. His most recent book is The Future of Natural History Museums. Thank you very much for coming and speaking with us today, Eric.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to share some of my experiences with others. So it's wonderful to be here, and hello, everyone. What I'm going to do is first give a slide presentation, which is a little bit autobiographical and focus a lot on what it's like to run a small museum and where I think the opportunities lie. I think that might take about 20 minutes, and then we'll just open it up and have a conversation. Let me know if at any point you want to have a question, something comes up, put it in the chat, and we'll get to it in that order, and we'll just have a free-flowing chat. So I'm just going to share my screen. Perfect. Okay. Small museums, challenges and opportunities. Here we go. All right. Thank you. As Elizabeth said, I am director and CEO of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. It is not a small museum. It was founded in 1879. We get about 1.2 million visitors a year, expecting about 1.6 by 2023. We're the largest natural history museum in the Southeast and the most single visited venue in North Carolina. We've got about 360 staff, including 65 researchers. We've got about 3,000 animals, of which many are on display, and our collection's about 4 million. So that is really on one end of the spectrum. And 10 years ago, I was director of this museum, the Wanganui Regional Museum, here in New Zealand. It's in the center of New Zealand, and New Zealand is in the center of the Pacific. So it's a long way away from just about anything. There were 9 staff members, and we had less than $1 million a year for everything, including maintenance of this 1919 building. There was no money for growth at all, to the point where if we wanted to create a t-shirt, there was simply no money for doing that. We had to get external money. There was no endowment, and New Zealand has no culture for philanthropy. And when I got there, there was an ancient website. There was really very little going on, and it hadn't changed significantly in probably 30 years. However, there was a really supportive board there was an amazing collection of Maori art and culture, an uncelebrated moa collection. So moa was the largest bird, the tallest bird ever to live. It was a relative of the ostrich. There were 11 species, of which this museum had 9. The parts of the building were completely unused because there was just no manpower to fill them up. But it was well respected nationally, especially for its Maori, not only arts and culture, but for the community relationships that it had. And there, in fact, there were 2 boards. One board was called Civic House, is called Civic House, which is the standard things you'd expect from a board: governance, helping with operations, thinking about finances. And then there was what was called a Tikanga Maori board, which is Tikanga Maori means Maori protocols. And it really focused on that side of things, because in New Zealand, that is very, very important. So this was a very small museum with a very constrained set of activities. I'll give you some other pictures of it. But first, just some generalities. This is not a picture of the museum, but sometimes this is what it felt like. So being the director of a museum like this, there were always funding problems, always staffing issues, just not enough staff to do anything. Capacity, everybody had to wear multiple hats, and trouble being taken seriously. We had a really big vision, but people would say, well, what could you possibly do in an ancient building that was at the time earthquake prone and with a tiny, tiny staff? So this was something that we had to contend with. But on the other hand, the advantages of being a small museum is that they're more nimble, right? We could respond to what was happening very, very quickly. Also, as the director, there are fewer layers to see through. So here, I have, at my current role, I have directors who are on the leadership team. They have unit heads. Underneath the unit heads are managers. Underneath those are multiple layers of staff. So, in some ways, it's far more direct in a smaller museum to get the vision out on the floor in front of the public, and also the role that a board of a small museum plays is far different. Also, I think that being a small museum, it was possible to innovate more easily than it is here. Back in Whanganui, I was able to work with, for instance, the Globe Shakespeare Society in New Zealand to create an exhibit of student-created Shakespeare costumes. Lots of fun, very easy. There was no one to ask. I just said, yes, let's do it. Where here, anything we do has to be run through multiple layers of stakeholders. It's just a very different experience. So here is the New Zealand $100 bill with Ernst Rutherford, Lord Rutherford, the father of nuclear physics, and he said this wonderful, wonderful phrase: "We don't have the money, so we have to think." And that actually was, and Rutherford, of course, is one of the most beloved figures in New Zealand because of what he did for the rest of the world. And his phrase is such a standard for nonprofits in New Zealand. It's really, I've seen, museum directors with like tote bags with this phrase on it. So it's wonderful. And that was really something that was so important for us. How do we take an incredibly under-resourced institution and make it do big things nevertheless? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about what we could do for free. One of the things was create free or for the resources that we could garner from our community. So we worked very closely with a local design firm to do not only our website, but our logo, show you both. And this logo is, now this would be resonant to anyone in New Zealand. The big picture that this makes is a Maori war canoe, and that this canoe is actually on display at Whanganui Regional Museum. And then examples of all the different kinds of things that you would see when you went there. And this, so for local people, this was a huge sense of pride because all of these things were iconic specimens that were either down in the basement that people could go and see or have been on display perhaps for generations. The museum 1995, I believe. And so many generations of local people have come to love this. And that was really, really important. The other thing, so here's a picture of the front of the museum. These banners we put up were part, so here's the head of one of them, of a moa, and it says, "You'll be amazed at what you discover." And the reason why, so that became our phrase, right? This is, again, something you can make a phrase for free. What is it that the community thinks about us? Where do we want them to be physically? I mean, like mentally about us. How do we use a catchphrase to get them there? So we didn't think that most of the community really knew who we were and what we were doing, and certainly nationally wouldn't be the case. So I said, let's put it right there on our front wall. You'll be amazed at what you discover here on the right, and on the left was a whole list of stuff you could see when you went in there. Really iconic stuff, and we just put it right on the front wall. The other thing is, again, so that we had to raise the money for 2 vinyl banners because we didn't have them at all, right? So we got a local firm to do it for free, which was great. This is just about building community, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But also this really tired, dead grass. You know, Whanganui gets a lot of rain in the winter, and in the summer, everything just dies. So we worked with the local Department of Conservation branch to create a garden out in the front. We didn't pay for this at all. This was stuff kind of leftover native plants that they were growing for other things. But not only did this become a beautiful front that resonated with people because it was local plants, but it also became a teaching tool because, for instance, this is a particular tree on the left-hand side here that was eaten by moa. Moa are now extinct, by the way, but the delicious leaves only grow at the top of the tree, and as the tree is a sapling, it has these spiky leaves that really protect the tree and are not very enticing. And so this is the kind of thing that we could say, well, the remnants of moa are still around. Some of these other plants were used in teaching programs. So that was really exciting. Then the next thing is, I said that we had moa bones, right? We had this really important collection. And so I'm thinking, how can we make our museum unique? So we thought, well, what do we have that won't cost us anything to create and celebrate? So down in the basement, we happen to have these old cases. And then we also happen to have this fantastically talented guy on our staff who had come from the film industry. But he was, right, and he was a set designer for the film industry, but he was completely underused. He was doing things like changing trash cans and, you know, fixing windows. And I said, well, all right, what can we create together? So we found some offcuts of wood for free. We did manage to spend a few dollars on some curved perspex. What do you call it here? I can't remember. We call it perspex, but there's some acrylic. There we go, acrylic panels that he could create something that matched these old cases. And then we articulated and we had some help to do that, articulated these bones to create the world's first gallery of Moa material. And that rivaled, in fact, surpassed what the National Museum was doing. The whole point is to take what you got and think big. Here's the website. The website, I mean, this is looking a little dated now. They haven't updated it since I left, unfortunately. But at the time, this was really state of the art. It had one of the first sliders. It was pretty exciting. And then the other thing we did, we were able to do this for almost no money. We got a grant to get us a scanner, and we took photographs and scanned things. And all of a sudden, our collection was online. And that was something we did for very, very low cost, which set us up in the top echelon of museums in New Zealand. And that's the other thing, is that online presence is a great leveler. You can do so much online, even if your bricks and mortar building is very, very tiny. And that's something too that we really was a huge lesson for us. So the question is, you know, I'm now in a very big museum. I came from one. How do these pieces all mesh together? For me, part of it is taking a small museum and thinking like a big museum. So this is what I would do in a museum of any size, but in some ways, well, it's important no matter what size institution you are to connect to the community. And this is step one. But if all of your resources are coming from the community, if you don't have an endowment, you don't have a lot of money to flash around, you must have that community support or you're not off the starting blocks. So that's a really important thing. And what do you do with that community? You gain trust. And this is where gaining trust partly comes from showing them whatever resources they provide to you are well stewarded. So even if you only have one gallery in your museum, that needs to be as professional and compelling as possible. If somebody gives you money, you not only do you thank them fulsomely, but you keep them engaged by telling them how you spent the money, bringing them in to show them how you used it. That's as true in a tiny museum as it is in a big one. You lose trust, you're done. The other one, and I mentioned this, tell a story. And that's not just about telling a story, a book on the wall, if you like, a big panel saying, this is what this object is. It's actually telling people the story of what you want to do and who you are and how the stories that you might see in the galleries relate to the bigger story of your existence and how that affects their existence. How is this part of the fabric of their lives? And museums are a bit behind the eight ball compared to universities in that there are no alumni. You come there to a university, you have your formative years there, and then you really care about them and you want them to succeed. And that's one of the things that helps the universities gain resources. But a museum, especially a natural history museum, is formative for children and really helps it helps your cause to think about how you are connecting the next generation of thinkers and doers to support you in the long term. So all of that ties up really well. Now, there are some tools to help you along. And for me, the most important tool is the strategic plan. You need to have that. And this is where this graph shows you, from me, the whole framework around how a strategic and annual plan will compel your community. And you can do that even if you are just one person or one person on a board, as people here are. But think about this too, right? So you've got a governance and leadership up here, team members down here, and team members could be community members, could be your volunteer pool. But on one level, you've got the top-down look at what your direction is, the mission, the vision, those sorts of things. But on the other hand, coming back, feedback and responses to the output here are equally important. You are partnering with your community in creating this strategic plan. So that's, for me, very important. And we have here, and I've always done, 3-year strategic plans. And then each year of that gets an annual plan. And so this, for me, is very important because it tells people who you are and what you will do, and then you have to make good on that. So I'm going to walk you through our strategic plan. I'll give you really just a quick run through. So here's the cover. To point out too that we have in-house designers, but when I was at a very small museum, we sent that outside, and I'll talk to you about some strategies on how you can do that on a very, very low budget. Table of contents. It was very important, and it always is important, for your strategic plan to have a sense of occasion. So here we had some extra pages, so we put some wonderful quotes in. Every single page, not only the content, but the look of the page says who we are. Here's the introduction, talking about just a welcome to people and what our general priorities are. Mission and vision gets a really important thing. Now, mission, to illuminate the natural world and inspire its conservation. This is a long-term perspective for us. And the vision for this particular strategic plan: a knowledgeable and empowered society making decisions informed by science. And that's going to come back again. Core values, who we are, what we stand for. And for us, it was very important to have scientific principles as well. So that really sets the statement, especially sort of basis in evidence. You know, and there are things like climate change that are of great concern to our community, but what we're in on both sides of the fence there. But it's very important for us to say what we trust is data, is evidence. Here's an introduction and more quotes, but here, back to the vision: a knowledgeable and empowered society making decisions informed by science. And it says our vision is focused firmly on the future. Interpreting it provides a basis for our work over the next 3 years. So here's this Venn diagram that shows how we are going to live our vision. So we have relevant and influential, prioritizing people, an environment that fosters innovation, nimble and responsive, and finally, business acumen. So each one of those strategic goals gets a series of actions. There's a focus on, here, 3 different foci. Here, prioritizing people. Each one of them has 3 different areas that we'll concentrate on. Strategic goal 3, so 4. It's very, very important that this is completely transparent. And I'll talk to you about in a moment how we make good on it. And the other thing is that as we roll out all 5 goals, they get more and more focused. They start out very broad, very innovative, very public facing. And as we go through, they get a lot more business focused. And so, and there is the end of the strategic plan. And if you just go to our website on the About page, you can actually get a copy of this. You can download as a PDF, or you can have this interactive that you can flip through. So it does nobody any good to have our strategic plan be just a document that gathers dust on the shelf. What we need is a strategic plan that we can live by. So I said that it goes to an annual plan. So each year there's a series of projects that make good on the strategic plan. Then we have implementation plan, performance planning, weekly feedback. Now, of course, we do that as a big museum, but even if you're just by yourself or you're with a small team of volunteers, all of this planning part of it is really important. You say, well, what are the projects I'm going to do for the year? What are the resources? Who's kind of got their hand to the pump and can make this thing happen? And what's perhaps unrealistic? Maybe that's a 3-year goal. We can't get everything done all at once. And then finally, these things, again, are more important for our bigger museum, but standard operating procedures, how you do what you do to make it most efficient, and then are all the people, and of course, position descriptions can be board roles and responsibilities. They don't have to be staff. So this is where all of this comes together, and this all-important feedback loop. If you get to the end of the year and you say, wow, well, we only did half our projects, what happened? That question, what happened and how do we make next year better, is critically important to this whole process. Then the last thing, and I'm almost done with this talk, but the one thing here, maybe some of you know this product life cycle. It was developed by Boston Consulting Group, and it's been adapted here for a nonprofit. But the basic idea is that you start, every new initiative you start is a mission investment, or why are you doing it? But you don't know if it's going to be any good or not. So once you put some investment in a product, and product can be product or service, it can be a display, it can be all kinds of things. So here is the beginning of the trajectory of your initiative. And if you're lucky and you're doing well, it starts out as a fantastic thing. You'll notice that it's net financial contribution compared to mission impact. So you're hoping that at the beginning you have a mission impact, but at the beginning it's a high mission impact, and it gives you a great return on investment. And maybe over time that mission impact is low, but it's still a great revenue earner. So you just keep doing it, and that is your cash cow. Or it will senesce, it will get old, your impact, your mission impact becomes lower, and you have to say, well, are we doing it just because we've done it, or are we doing it because it's really important? And for a small museum where your resources are so limited, you've got to make sure that every single thing you do has a really high impact for you. So here, you've kind of the extension of this is you've got war horses, which you retain the initiative. It has a significant impact whether you've got a positive cash impact or not. It is really mission aligned, and you retain the initiative even if it doesn't give you a big revenue. Or you go, no, look, it's just not worth it. The return on investment is not there. And it's really important that you keep this in mind, not only when you are thinking about new initiatives, but you want to make yourselves as lean as possible to say, we have so few resources. Is everything we're doing really valuable to our bottom line? So Elizabeth mentioned, thank you very much. The Future of Natural History Museums is my latest book, and some of this is covered in there. The importance of measures, the importance of understanding where you're at, and going through the kind of process to say, like Lord Rutherford, we don't have the money, so we have to plan. So there is my talk, and I'm really very happy to start a conversation. Thank you. Elizabeth, you're on
Yes,
mute.
thank you.
There you go.
It took me a while to figure that out. Thanks. So this was terrific, and you did answer some of my questions. Should I give other people an opportunity to ask a question? I've got a whole list of them, so you can come back to me. Does anybody else have a question?
Liz, I think you should start. But I just want to make one comment and say hello to Eric. Eric, Michael Moore here. I think you have a friend of mine in your first floor in the form of Stumpy.
Oh, wonderful.
I led the necropsy on Stumpy that generated the bones that went your way.
Oh, that's great. Well, Stumpy's hugely popular. It's so great to meet you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking care of Stumpy, because
come and visit.
Yeah.
Be great to meet you in person. Thank you.
All right. Anyway, back to Liz.
Okay, that's great. Mike is now one of our board members. We're lucky enough to have him help us out here. I guess we have been working on a strategic plan. Unfortunately, it seems that there are a lot of ideas and not enough hands. Can you recommend a way to get docents involved? We do have so many projects. I've got inventory that has never been done on some of these displays. Display design that has never been finished on some of these displays, which worries me because of that photo I told you about. If it's a sloppy display, it implies that security is less than.
Right.
Anyway, so any thoughts on encouraging docents that are willing to help with these projects? Basically, we have lots of ideas. We need more hands.
Right. So, there's a few ways to go about this, which is and they're not mutually exclusive. One is prioritizing your ideas, so you're working on one thing at a time. So what is the most important thing to get done? Work on that, tick it off, have a sense of completion and celebration, get out with the community with that success, and then move on to the next one. So that's one part of the strategy. The other strategy, of course, is more hands. And and this is where board members can be very, very helpful, helping find those people to work with you on projects. The third part of that strategy is that once you get them in, and once you have a workflow going, of course, people take great pride in that. And with great pride comes a sense of community. And so then the question is, do you have a place? And I feel like we might have had a little bit of a conversation about that aspect before, but do you have a place in your facility that is like a breakout room, that is a place for volunteers to connect and create their own community? Go ahead.
Our biggest issue is that we are basically one room, one large room. All the exhibits are from 1872 when the building was opened. and they surround the perimeter of the museum. And then the center of the museum, that's where we run our programs.
Right.
You know, so
So
breakout
one
space.
thing that
But what we
can-
could do is add, some hours just for docents to be here.
That's right. That's what I was just about to say. And maybe in a closet you've got, or somewhere you can put some folding chairs and a folding card table or something. And on the docent only times, bring those out, get some coffees in, get some cupcakes or muffins or something, and have a time for socializing so that people can feel that there's something of theirs that is connected to the physical place, and celebrate their achievements. If somebody writes a new panel for one of your displays, or somebody reorganizes some of the objects or whatever, have that be a thing that makes a difference to everyone who's volunteering. And of course, endorsement and thanks by the board chair, and the more you can wrap people up in this and make them feel not only celebrated but internally compelled to keep going, that's the thing that creates a movement, in a sense.
That's great. Thank you. That's a great idea. My second question is insurance and security for display items. We have, like I mentioned, these very, very old historic cabinets. They are not secure. And I guess without having a large budget, how would you go about getting some kind of well, first off, can you insure something that may not be, have a price tag? It's, so valuable that, how do you insure a historic item?
Right. So there are arts insurers who will do bulk insurance is the answer for that, really. So for irreplaceable items, you can't do it. You can't base it on replacement value, but you can do. You can get bulk insurance, and American Alliance of Museums can give you more direct advice on that. That's who I would go to for advice. I mean, we're insured through the state of the state of North Carolina, so it's kind of we're not under the same umbrella as a lot of institutions. But the other thing is, you might not be able to get insurance if your displays are not secure. And so one of the things is to be able to that's a pretty big issue, actually, security. So how you do that, whether you can get locks or certain cabinets, or you can, whatever it is, but the insurer will be the ones to help with that, or to tell you what their standards are that they will accept or not. So,
okay. All right. So that's good. So we put security first but we reach out to the insurance companies, and then they will tell us what they want for security before they insure us.
Right. And they may say, look, a person there for all the time that the exhibits are available to the public, and then a locked door when it's unmanned might be enough. I just don't know. And that's you need real expertise in that area to be able to say it. But again, American Alliance of Museums would be a real resource for that.
Okay, I will reach out to them. Thank you.
Sure.
And I worry about the image of the Natural History Museum as being dated artifacts only. And I was wondering, we have a couple of local, universities, colleges,
Right.
Hui is within, driving distance. Is this something that maybe we could, what I'd like to see is some kind of a partnership with an outside entity. This would actually have to happen after we've got a viable inventory list, which we don't have. But to bring research into our tiny little space here. Is that
Okay.
something that we should
Well,
focus
yes.
on?
And so I'm just going to jump back to one thing about security and insurance. One thing that is free that you must do if you haven't done it already is photograph every single object that you have. Individually photograph, put it on a table. This is something that a volunteer could do. Use your digital camera, or your phone if that's all you've got. But for insurance purposes, and look, back in New Zealand, there was a Army Museum. The Army Museum had a bunch of things like Victoria Crosses and military uniforms and all kinds of stuff stolen by an employee. And everything that they did not have a photograph of was not able to be confiscated and returned because they had no proof. There's lots of certain kinds of military uniforms. There's lots of Victoria Crosses out there, but each one has a slight difference. If you have a photograph of that, then you can prove to the police, yes, that arrowhead or that whale tooth is absolutely ours, and they can compare the two, and that's your evidence. So that to me is far more than having an inventory, an archive of that. At the very least, have a photograph. Do the things that you can do easily and cheaply first, and then add on. And the other thing is that doing things like that, gives a very defined high priority project for somebody or a group of volunteers. And then the other thing is that once you're starting to go for grants like National Endowment of the Arts grants, NEH or NEA grants, or whoever your group is, NEH might be the heritage side of that, is probably more likely. Then you have a basis to build on. And that's one of the things that a strategic plan helps with, right? You've got a trajectory that is actually on paper that you can share with people. So that's, but getting back to your other question, sorry, can you remind me of your original question?
Research opportunity, bringing new
research
things
opportunities. I don't think that you necessarily need to wait until you have an archived database of your collection until you get researchers in. For one thing, they can help you do that, right? They can help you research the things that you need, and students are great volunteers for all kinds of things. And that also gets back to my step one, build community. It's really critically important that you don't just have a laundry list of things you want people to do for you. Build these projects in partnership. Get to know some of the professors. Say, look, what kind of, we'd like to make our facility available for research. What could you see doing that adds value to your program that will help us achieve our goals? The more you give, the more you get back. And so
Okay.
don't think about it in terms of help to you. Think about what value you can add to the community, and they will do the same for you. I think that that's, there's nothing better than that. Is that helpful?
That's extremely helpful. Thank you.
Good.
And, hopefully we have some interested college students interested in museum work or in some of our collections that we can
Right.
ask to start projects with. We actually used to have a professor that was on our board actually, and her thing was bones, and she brought all our graduates in, and they designed a bone display for us, which was wonderful.
That's wonderful. But the other thing is that here's the other point, and this is a problem that I have too. Once people cycle off your board, what legacy are they leaving, right? Is there an ongoing university program, or is there one that could be developed where it's not dependent on a single person? That's the other thing, especially a small museum can't afford for these relationships to be invested solely between individuals, or when that person goes, you've lost it.
Happened over and over and over again. That's
Right.
exactly what happened with the
And
bones.
and this is where thinking about that proactively and saying, what is one of our priorities for our strategic plan, to make some of those initiatives that people bring to us embedded in the DNA of our institution, not just based on an individual. Now, how you do that, of course, there are many different ways, but having that kind of thing in your strategic plan. And the other thing I'm going to say, just apropos to strategic plans, don't confuse strategic plan with a master plan. Don't say, all right, we're going to have a 10-room institution and we're going to have a $20 million endowment and X, Y, and Z. Think about 3 years. Think about separate long-term vision, which is very, very important and part of your storytelling, with what you can achieve in 3 years. And I suggest 3 years is probably a really good length of strategic plan, because the world is changing very rapidly. There are opportunities and risks coming up all the time. And by the time you get into your 4th and 5th years, you're just going to say, oh, wow, I know so much more than I did 3 years ago. We really need something else. So that's my own personal thought. But definitely do the long-term thinking, but don't make the strategic plan so visionary and so long, based on a huge horizon that you can't actually achieve it in 3 years. So, by the way, Matt, thank you, Matt, put the link to our strategic plan in the chat.
That's terrific. Thank you very much, Matt. Coincidentally, I was reading yesterday that you said something about the Yale Peabody Museum celebrating its 150th and what they did.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we're doing next year. We are 150 years in existence as of 2022. So we are hoping to do some, celebratory activities. I noticed that I guess, put 2 books out, published 2 books. They had a whole program of talks on.
Great, yes.
And I got a kick out of the temporary exhibit that was entitled Treasures of the Yale Peabody, 150 Years of Exploration and Discovery. And it seemed like it was not just science or natural history, it was just all the odds and ends too, the curious things that they had pulled out that really was from when they were a cabinet of curiosity, one of those, which is what we have here. We have maybe you know, we could use more of the scientific bent. We do have, you know, harpoons. We do have harpoons. We have rifles, swords, you know,
Right.
but it might be fun to pull that out and have a special exhibit just for that kind of thing.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, just to show our history of how we started.
That's wonderful. That's a great idea. I mean, the human story is always compelling.
I don't know where they came from. You know,
Right.
provenance is kind of lacking.
Right. But there again, there may be some interested person. You know, I'm always amazed at whenever I watch Antiques Roadshow, where somebody can bring in something that is just an object and come away with something that actually has real provenance. So, you know, there are experts out there who can help, and maybe people who will just find it so interesting that they'll contribute in that way.
That's terrific. Yeah, that I wonder if they'd come down and do our take a look at our collections.
Well, and I mean, you just never know who's out there, you know, whaling aficionados or whatever. Yeah.
And I have one more. The inventory, if when we do get to doing the inventory, we did start a couple of years ago, and interestingly, we did start with just photographing from every angle certain items and putting them in an Excel program. But it's not exactly an ideal program, but we're, you know, again, very limited on budget. Is there a better inventory computer program for inventory for a museum?
Well, Microsoft Access is, if you can get it as part of the program that you have with Excel, is probably the best small museum. And the nice thing is that as you get bigger, it translates to other bigger databasing programs. So that's one that is very cost effective. It's a data, rather than a spreadsheet like Excel, it's a database. So each object gets its own entry, its own page. And then you can add photos, you can add all the provenance and the notes that you have. And of course, you can give, each one gets its own unique number. So that's the one I would use as a kind of entry-level database program. And because if you're already using Excel, a lot of the relationship with Microsoft Office products are intuitive. You know, they're a bit like Word or Outlook or whatever. You know, they kind of feel like the same thing.
All right. That's terrific. Thank you very much. It's very helpful. I'm out of questions. Does anybody else have a question?
Hi, Eric. My name is Mike. I serve on the board, and I did arrive a couple minutes late, but one of the questions that I've had, and we've talked about it at some of our board meetings, are the idea of sort of object or exhibit exchanges with other area museums.
Sure.
We're not the only small museum either in the area or, you know, in our region. And I don't have any experience with that, you know, relationship with other institutions. Do you have any insight into how that typically works, or whether that's a viable thing for a very small, you know, museum like ours that, like Elizabeth said, doesn't yet have an inventory system up and running, and, you know, how exchanges like that might work, or would it be useful? Or I'd always imagined that it might help to augment the number of hands that we have, you know, extending it out to institutes that already have other hands working on those sorts of things.
Right. Well, the huge advantage also is that it allows you to tell your story in a different way and celebrate something new being in the museum for a short term, right? So if you know, instead of having a whole show, you could get a series of objects in a cabinet and say, look, you know, here's something that you won't have seen before, even if you come into the museum and know everything that's there. So yes, I think that that's an excellent idea. And of course, as an exchange, other small museums would love to have, for a fixed period, stuff that you have that can broaden their story. So that is a great idea. Though there's a few things that you've got to be very mindful of. One is insurance. So make sure that everything that goes on loan is insured, and that you have insurance to cover any sort of breakage or loss or whatever of their material coming in. So that's one thing. The other thing is incredibly detailed documentation, right? So nothing should leave the building that isn't in that database, right? So you absolutely have to do that. And it needs to be completely photographed, not only for tracking it in case it's lost, but for condition reports. Everything that is going out of the museum gets a condition report, and coming in gets a condition report. And that's your own objects or the objects of other people, right? Because you want to know, let's say you're getting 20 items from another institution, photograph them when they get there and when they leave your institution, so that when the people on the other side are going, well, hang on, it's chipped, and it wasn't chipped when we gave it to you, you can then say, yes, it was chipped when we brought it out of the box, right? So that's the kind of thing, all of that stuff up front means that you'll have a successful, you're only planning for when something goes wrong, but thank goodness you've done it so that when something does go wrong, you've got all this backup. So, but as a general rule, it's a fantastic idea, really. And the other thing is that you might get to the point where you've got enough, let's say there's design students and there's other volunteers around who can help create a whole display. You could send a whole display with it, like just a mini exhibition, and maybe partner with another organization to bring a small display in. So you're not just getting the objects, but you're getting all the interpretation and everything else that goes with it. So, but it's exactly in line with what I was talking about, which is what can you do for the limited resources you can? How big can you think for free, essentially? So, is that helpful?
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Great. Awesome.
So, Eric, I'm also on the board. My name's Karen, and we have done a 3 to 5 year plan that we have in more spreadsheet fashion. What I'm definitely hearing is the importance of adding narrative to it.
Oh, completely. No, go ahead.
And I was just wondering, beyond needing that, is just it's sort of what you're saying. Thank you first for doing this this conversation. I think it's really helpful. It's illuminating to me how important it would even be from a donor perspective of having it in a beautiful layout and narrative.
So what I'll tell you, when I was back at Ponganui, we had no money for printing, like almost nothing. And so what we did was create the whole strategic plan in black and white on a photocopier. But the only thing we did, we spent the money on a beautiful cover that was just one-sided, 11 by 17, and we hand stapled the covers onto the photograph stuff. And the way we decorated inside, there are plenty of free 19th century etchings and things you can just get online. We made the entire thing in Microsoft Word. We fit the pictures in. It was basic, but it looked really beautiful. And the more you play around with things like watermarks and changing stuff around and JPEGs, it looked quite good. And so for just a few dollars, and then what we did was we printed enough off so that I personally could go to prospective donors and I could sit with them and I could walk them through our strategic plan and leave it with them. And that's when you start to get those people enthused, it's because you're telling the big story. And you can just, I don't like to give a talk unless I have a PowerPoint presentation, because it's always, here's the example. And I put a lot of time into those. That's what your strategic plan can do for you. It's a marketing tool. Bring those donors on the journey with you. And I think it'll serve you really well.
Mm. And I can imagine it's helpful from a volunteer perspective of getting people just excited about the changes that are happening.
Yes. And there's something about a beautifully presented strategic plan that gives it gravitas, right? Even though the words are the same, if people know that you've put the time and thought into making it beautiful, it gives respect to the reader. And if that reader is a volunteer who's going to come and help, or a university professor who's going to think about joining you in a partnership program, all of those things make a really, really big difference.
It's pushy of me to ask, but once we have it finished, would you mind looking at it and just offering?
Wouldn't at all. That's fine. Please do send it. And the other thing is, and I have seen your website, but it's been a while. If you have the opportunity to put the PDF of your strategic plan on the website, and it doesn't, I showed you the slide, that program where you can take a PDF and you can do the page turning thing. I don't personally know how to do it, but I haven't tried. But I do know that you can just put the PDF into that program and it'll do it for you. And how impressive is that, to be able to say, let's walk through it, And the other thing, again, I can't remember your website, but try to have a modern website. I said before, the digital world is completely leveling. It doesn't matter if you just have one room or an entire building to play with. The digital world is free for everybody. And WordPress.com has free website templates that you can populate that look incredibly sophisticated. So that's something that I would, and if you can put a little bit of money into it, I would suggest buying a professional template. And we're talking about $20, $50. It's not a ton of money. And so you get just that next level of sophistication. And then all you're doing is writing and putting in photographs. And those can be free too. You can find Wikimedia Commons or whatever. And so then the world is your oyster. Make that your platform for the next big thing. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, no, I was going to, it rings true for us. Karen and I together have a graphic and web design company. And so
Great.
We do websites and marketing for clients, and we try to bring that to the museum. And like Elizabeth said, it's a matter of the hands and the time too.
Right.
The museum is dear to us. We don't get to spend as much time on it as Elizabeth does. And I know Elizabeth loves the museum as well. And I think all of us do. And if I didn't have all these clients and bills to pay.
Yeah, but this is the other thing is too, if you're able to put a bit of intellectual resource into creating a template-driven website, then Elizabeth can get student bloggers in, or somebody to create, upfront content or describe a new exhibit. I mean, this is, the more you can provide a platform for community members to contribute their own ideas and their own enthusiasm, the easier it is and the less work it is for you specifically. So
That's great.
I mean, I'm
Really?
probably telling you stuff
No, it's funny. There's the bits and pieces we know, and then the way your perspective on it is just really
Right.
helpful to see it from a different perspective. We're always thinking that somehow we need to find the time to do it, and uncomfortable about asking for the help. And the help is what, when people can help, that's when they feel community, right? Like
That,
when
well,
people
the other thing,
stick to something.
you know, if you're a student blogger or whatever you might be, you would love the opportunity to make a name for yourself by doing something for something that's called a museum. And so people, if it's a win-win opportunity, people get very, very excited about that. Same with social media. If you've got Facebook, if you've got Instagram, getting people to do that posting for you means that it helps them establish a profile. And I'm the worst person in the world for this. I always try to do everything myself. And delegating things to people is hard for me, actually. But it's what you have to do, because you can't do it all. And Elizabeth can't do it all. So.
That's great. Any other questions for Eric before we let him get on with his day?
I had a question. Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation, Eric. My name is Maggie. I'm also a board member on the museum. And so most of our income from the museum comes from memberships and donations. Right. And then our education programs. It doesn't cost anything to come to the museum. So we've debated for memberships how to encourage membership and what kind of benefits to provide for people if they become a member. I don't know if you have any recommendations on.
Sure, I do.
On that kind of thing.
So there's two kinds of members, really. One is call it an emotional member, somebody who wants to support because they care about the museum and they want it to succeed. The other one is a transactional member who really wants benefits because they're interested in what they can get without paying for it. So it makes it a different. Do you have a door charge?
No.
Okay. So it's one thing you could do is, for instance, all right, so we'll start with the emotional members. They're the ones who are going to want to see the strategic plan. They're the ones who are going to want volunteer opportunities, but also will take a lot of pride when it's seen out in the community. If you're written up by a local magazine or whatever, they're the ones who will care about that. And you have to bring them along your big journey, not just your 3-year journey, but your 20-year journey. And that's a lot about storytelling. The transactional members are the ones that you're going to, that they're still invested, but they actually want some sort of product for it. So for them, things like an e-bulletin, something like that comes out, and there's a lot of great resources that will allow you to, create e-newsletters, something like that. And I'm saying not physical newsletters because then you have the printing costs associated with it, but something that's really nicely laid out that comes to a member once a month would be great. The other thing is, if you have a special exhibition, we were just talking about maybe it's an object exchange or a small exhibition exchange with another institution, something that might have an upcharge that doesn't apply to them. That's also something that would be really helpful. And the other thing is, I know you've got one room, but can you be creative about where else you might show? Like if you had a temporary exhibition, is there something in town near you that might be a venue like a town hall where you might easily charge enough charge to get in, but you're working with the city because it's maybe some sort of thing for tourists. There might be some of that you could do. And if they got in for free, that might be something else that you could do. The other thing might be, again, I know it's hard because, you know, you're already, I'm sure, Elizabeth, working every hour that exists. But if there are evening programs that are free to members that are not, maybe these could be volunteer run to, showing movies, having expert lectures, those sorts of things. The other thing you can do, maybe even easier, is online lectures, right? So somebody who's coming in talking about the history of whaling, for instance, or the biology of whales, or who knows what it might be. If you can get them to connect with you and you offer it free to members and charge for other people, or it's only open to members, those are the kinds of things that are going to attract transactional members. Then the other things too that might be member benefits that would serve both. Could you think about an annual T-shirt or sweatshirt or something like that? You don't have a shop, I believe. Is that right?
Right.
Like a gift shop? But
No.
you could perhaps work with a donor. T-shirts are not that expensive. Also, mugs are a great thing. You might have an annual Christmas gift for all members. I don't know how much you have, how many members you've got, but if it's not too expensive, give them a gift that they don't, that nobody else gets. And of course, if it's a $12 mug, and it costs you, I don't know, maybe it costs you $5, write that into the cost of membership. So get as much value packed into those memberships, but don't take it out of your coffers, take it out of the membership price. The other thing is, I'm not sure what your levels of membership are, but think about different levels. Basic membership that is set really low and can be a conveyor belt to higher levels of membership and possibly even donors later on. So maybe it's I don't know, no idea what your membership costs. Maybe it's $10 at your most basic, and your biggest one is $150. And at $150, you have a lunch or a dinner for them once a year. You know, there's all kinds of things. And the other thing is, go to other museum websites, find out what their member benefits are. The other place to go for interesting ideas is American Association of Museums also will be a great place for ideas around membership benefits.
American
Great, yeah, thank you.
Association of Museums.
Yeah, they would. Was that helpful?
Yes, those are all really helpful. Thank
Great,
you.
great.
Okay, we've run a little over. Does anybody else have a question? Eric, I'm sure I'm going to be reaching out to you with more questions down the
Sure,
line.
Absolutely. Very happy to connect.
Liz,
Thank
could
you so much for coming to, for offering this to us. And I think you've given us a lot to think about and a lot of really great ideas.
Good. Huge pleasure.
Mary Lou, you had a question? Sorry, Mary Lou?
just real quick. Thank you, Liz. Just real quick. What is his opinion of the future of small natural history museums?
Wow, that's a really big question.
Oh, sorry. Well,
No.
I'll
And
send you an email.
well, but the other thing is the book that I wrote really talks about,
Okay.
because the thing is, it is not a future for that sector of museums. It's this future for museums who grab onto the opportunities, I think is very, very good. I think the ones that don't and try and just do what they've always done, I think is probably a little more challenging, you know, especially with the pandemic and priorities changing. Climate change is going to make things more difficult than easier. So it's not, I think that it's, yeah, museums who seize the day are going to succeed. I think the ones who don't are going to struggle. But so that is, I mean, it's not a, you know, this is not a huge plug, go out and buy my book, but that is really a lot of what is covered there. So
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Eric.
sure. All right. Have a lovely rest of your day, and look forward to seeing you be incredibly successful.
Thank you, Eric.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Thank you, Matt.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.